Okay, folks, this is a good story. Another win for the pro-Palestine movement. We like to cover the wins because we mostly cover the losses here, but it's easy to fall into despair when you only cover the losses. It's, I think, very important for morale to highlight the wins. And this was a big win. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel drops all charges against University of Michigan pro-Palestinian protesters. This was a very big story in September of last year, which you guys will probably remember as we go through this. So this is an important victory here. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel has dropped all charges against 7 pro-Palestinian protesters arrested last year on the University of Michigan diag. What the fuck is that? Is that like a quad? Is that what they call it? I don't know what campus speak is.
I guess.
A diag? Is that a quad?
I mean, I've never heard that in my life, but I'm assuming.
Yeah, maybe that's Midwestern for quad. Who knows?
Yeah. It's like pop.
Who knows? I'm self-taught. Didn't spend much time at university.
You've never been
to diag. I've never been to a diag before. I've been to a quad a few times on a few occasions, but never a diag. The 7 were facing misdemeanor charges of trespassing as well as felony charges of resisting and obstructing police. The defendants in the cases were Oliver Kostler, Samantha Lewis, Henry McKean Shapiro, Michael Mueller, Assad Siddiqui, Avi Takna Fram, wow again, 2 Jews on this list, and Rhiannon Willow, all had pleaded not guilty. The group had hugged each other, smiled, and posed for a photo with their attorneys in the courtroom after learning the news. I told you it's a great day, Lewis, one of the defendants, said to the others when their lawyers entered the courtroom from a meeting in the judge's chambers. Outside the courthouse before the proceedings began, about 50 demonstrators rallied in front of a sign reading "Drop the Charges." Speakers used an amplifier to address the crowd decrying the war in Gaza as genocide. Inside the courthouse, the decision to drop the charges stunned defense lawyers who were prepared to offer closing arguments in a preliminary exam that began in February. So this was a surprise to the legal team. Here is the defense attorney.
Statement for all of us. Jamil, come here. All the lawyers, please follow me. I want to say one thing to everybody here. This is not just a victory for these students today. This is a victory for everybody that believes in the right to free speech. This is a victory that shows that when you stand up for what you believe in this country, today, as we've always said, this was not about trespass. This was not about a felony conduct. This was the criminalization of free speech, and today the state of Michigan agrees that you still have the right to speak up. Today, we want to remember that this is not the end. There are still students across the country that are facing this persecution. There's still a genocide that is happening in Palestine. And we should never forget that today we still get to stand firm and say, "Free Palestine!"
So a surprise victory there for the defense. Last month, Nessel faced calls for her to recuse herself for what critics describe as bias in the case. Remember the word bias. There's a big to-do made over that word bias regarding this very case just 8 months ago. But Nessel faced calls for her to recuse herself for what critics describe as bias in the case. In a statement issued after the court hearing, Nessel defended herself and her decision to seek the felony charges. "We did so based on the evidence and facts of the case," the statement said. "I stand by those charges and that determination." Nessel criticized Ann Arbor District Judge Cedric Simpson for the slow pace of the case, saying there'd been months and months of court hearings without a ruling on whether there was enough evidence to send the case to circuit court for trial. During this time, the case has become a lightning rod of contention, Nessel's statement said. Baseless and absurd allegations of bias have only furthered this divide. The motion for recusal has been a diversionary tactic which has only served to further delay the proceedings. Another factor in her decision, Nessel said, was a letter from the Jewish Federation of Greater Ann Arbor defending Nessel from accusations of bias. The letter was submitted to the court on May 2nd. The notion that A.G. Nessel is biased against Muslims and Americans of Arab descent is unfounded and deeply offensive, the letter said. Nessel has a strong history of uplifting those in both the Muslim and Arab American communities. Well, talk about shooting yourself in the dick. By writing that letter, they only made it harder for her to stay on the case, because now she's getting letters of support from Jewish groups, which only further reinforces the idea that she may have a bias. Not because she's Jewish. Is this starting to ring a bell to you guys? It should, and we will clear this up in a moment. Nessel, said the letter was inappropriate. The Free Press has asked her office to elaborate, but didn't receive an immediate response. We have, meaning the Detroit Free Press, the good Free Press, not Barry Weiss's Free Press.
Not the other one.
Not to be confused with the unfree press. We have learned that a public statement with the hygiene Free Press, as they call it now.
This is not the one you get the Kugel recipes from.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. We have learned that a public statement in support of my office from a local nonprofit has been directly communicated to the court, Nessel's statement said. The impropriety of this action has led us to the difficult decision to drop these charges. That's right. I think that the possibility of recusal was going to be so embarrassing for Nessel that she just couldn't bear it, Lewis said. And so while all of us, and that includes all of you, refused to cower, she did. And that just goes to show that the bullies and badges and the top pig are just cowards. Good for her. Lewis acknowledged she still faces charges in a separate case involving a protest at Festival, the school's annual student organizing fair. A hearing in that case is scheduled for next month, and she hopes to see those charges dismissed as well. So let's recall the argument over this term bias. This is from last year. This was the big story at the time. We covered this at least once, if not twice. Tlaib slams Nessel for targeting pro-Palestinian students at University of Michigan, a dangerous precedent, she says. So in the article, she gives the following quote: Tlaib criticized Nessel for what she believes is a biased approach to the protest. We've had the right to dissent, the right to protest, Tlaib says. We've done it for climate, the immigrant rights movement, for Black lives, and even around issues of injustice among water shutoffs. But it seems that the Attorney General decided if the issue was Palestine, she was going to treat it differently, and that alone speaks volumes about possible biases within the agency she runs. And the magazine adds, Nessel is the first Jewish person to be elected Attorney General of Michigan. So what the media, in one voice, tried to imply is that Tlaib was suggesting that because Nessel is Jewish, she's biased against Palestinians, when the quote here doesn't even accuse Nessel of personal bias herself. It says it speaks volumes about possible biases within the agency she runs. And the point of bringing up the other protests was, hey, we've been protesting all kinds of issues for a long time, never had a problem like this. We protest the climate, we protest immigrant rights, we protest for BLM. Never had problems like this. Only when we protest for Palestine do we have a problem. So that's the bias she's talking about, a broad, systemic, anti-Palestinian bias that cracks down on protests around this issue while it doesn't crack down nearly as hard about protests on other issues. No fair-minded interpretation of that would lead you to believe that she's singling Nessel out for being Jewish and that is the source of her bias. That's, of course, an absurd argument, but it's an argument that the media, in one loud voice, ran with. So here's Jake Tapper pressing Gretchen Whitmer about Tlaib's quote-unquote anti-Semitic remarks about her AG.
General Dana Nessel charged almost a dozen individuals from the University of Michigan over the anti-Israel protests. Among the charges, attempted ethnic intimidation, assaulting or obstructing a police officer, and on and on. These are pro-Palestinian protesters who are being punished and prosecuted. Michigan Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who is Palestinian, she called the charges from Nessel, who is Jewish, shameful. And Tlaib said, quote, it seems that the Attorney General decided if the issue was Palestine, she was going to treat it differently, and that alone speaks volumes about possible biases within the agency she runs, unquote. Nessel responded by saying, quote, Rashida Tlaib should not use my religion to imply I cannot perform my job fairly as Attorney General. It's anti-Semitic and wrong, unquote. Do you think that Tlaib's suggestion that Nessel's office is biased was anti-Semitic?
Listen, Jake, you know what? All I can say is that I know that our Jewish community is in pain, as is our Palestinian and Muslim and Arab communities in Michigan. I know that seeing the incredible toll that this war has taken on both communities has been really challenging and difficult, and my heart breaks for so many. But as governor, my job is to make sure that both these communities are protected and respected under the law in Michigan, and that's exactly what I'm going to stay focused on.
A complete non-answer, of course. Wow, what a talent she is. Wow.
No, not did you eat, but Jew eat?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Attorney General Nessel is not doing her job because Congresswoman Tlaib is suggesting that she shouldn't be prosecuting these individuals that Nessel says broke the law, and that she's only doing it because she's Jewish and the protesters are not. That's quite an accusation. Do you think it's true?
It's quite a bullshit accusation. Let's see. Does she answer the question?
Like I said, Jake, I'm not going to get in the middle of this argument that they're having. I can just say this.
Okay, so she goes back to her bullshit, tries to both sides it, tries to stay out of it, but she would cave shortly after that. She gives a statement to Jake Tapper, I guess, after the interview. And he tweets out, Governor Whitmer's statement just now, the suggestion that Attorney General Nessel would make charging decisions based on her religion as opposed to the rule of law is anti-Semitic. So, yeah, she ends up backing Nessel on that, which is, of course, ridiculous. Jake Tapper then has Nessel on herself to ask her what she meant by this. And listen, we're going to listen to just a little of this.
You called Congresswoman Tlaib's reaction to your office's charges and her allegation that you and your office have bias. You said that was anti-Semitic. Why?
Well, look, for her to say that I could handle a litany of other cases and that was fine, but when it comes to anything involving pro-Palestinian protesters, I could not be fair. I could not be...
Up. Okay, so this is the part. We're only going to play this part. This is an example of what abject, shameless liars these people are.
Well, look, for her to say that I could handle a litany of other cases and that was fine, but when it comes to anything involving pro-Palestinian protesters, I could not be fair. I could not be objective. And I don't...
That's not what she said. That's just plainly not what she said. What she says is, we've done it. We've had the right to dissent, the right to protest. We've done it for climate, immigrant rights, black lives, and water shutoffs. What she's saying there is obviously that the state has a special hard-on for pro-Palestine protesters because you allowed them to protest all these other issues. Not that you can handle all those other issues. She made a very specific point about how there was no draconian crackdown on those issues the way there is about this, and that speaks to biases within the agency. It was such an egregiously dishonest smear that those memories of doing that segment came back when I read about this. Yeah. And at the time, it was so frustrating because all of us have felt this way, that we go out, we protest, we do stories like this, we try our best to get the word out, and it's gratifying in a sense to be able to do it. We feel like we're doing something, but from time to time, we've all asked ourselves, well, what's the point of this, right? It doesn't matter. Look at how egregiously they lie. Look at Jake Tapper. Look at Gretchen Whitmer. Look at Dana Nessel. Look at how the media in one voice just completely distorts this whole case. What does it matter? Well, turns out it matters quite a lot, because if Rashida Tlaib had not made noise about the bias within the agency, she would not have dropped these charges. She dropped these charges because bias did come up, and rather than recuse herself, which would have been completely embarrassing because she made such a stink about how dare you accuse me of bias. So then to recuse herself would be a huge political L that she wasn't willing to take, and so instead she just dropped the whole charge. So the moral of this story is that something that can seem futile and useless in the moment can come back and make a huge difference later. And I think it's important to highlight stories where these protest actions do matter. They may not feel like they matter right now, but they do. There's that very moving scene in No Other Land where the villagers go out and protest on a regular basis. And Yuval asks, why do you keep doing this? How do you keep doing this? Look, every time you do it, you have a violent clash with the IDF. He says, if we keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it and don't give up, we have a chance. When we give up, we have no chance. So that's the moral of this story.
I told them just because I brought the matzah bride to the dirty Arab bastard meeting
Right. Yeah, exactly.
doesn't mean you can write me a letter in the middle of a case. Nessel, it's interesting how her name keeps coming up in the worst context in Michigan, because Jordan Sheridan's book, We the Poisoned, she's one of the main villains of that book, along with Whitmer, because actually there had been a Republican AG who was working with an experienced, I think he was former FBI investigator, and they were putting together a RICO case against Snyder and company. And Nessel came in, canceled that whole case, essentially sabotaged it while pretending to start a new case. There was already a case there. They had already built the case. Took the experienced investigator off the case. And in the end, no RICO charges, very few charges for any of the participants. And when we had Jordan on, I was asking him about that. And he said it's because a lot of banks backed the bonds to allow this switch to the Flint River, and they would have been exposed as complicit if a case like that had gone forward. And this is a big part of why Republicans, as horrible as they are, have an electoral advantage very often. Because if you like what the Republicans are about, say you're the kind of person who would give money to a crackhead for saying the N-word to a child, say you're that kind of person, the Republicans are giving you what you want, right? They're giving you what you want in spades. The Democrats, if you are somebody who thinks that maybe people who poison a mostly black town should actually go to prison, the Democrats are giving you nothing. So the people who are going to come out and vote for that, which I believe is actually a majority of the people, there's no one to vote for.
Exactly.
But the people who are into what the Republicans stand for, which is horrific, but hits certain dog whistles, presses certain buttons for a certain kind of person, even though they don't represent, I believe, they don't represent a majority of the public. You can't beat something with nothing. They're getting something. Why would you come out and vote for Whitmer and Nessel? If you actually know their record, they're prosecuting Palestinians, and they sabotaged the RICO case against the people who destroyed countless lives in Flint, Michigan with this dodgy water scheme. So why would you vote for them? That's why. When the Democrats and the Republicans, when they go to the polls, it's not that the Republicans are so popular. It's that the Democrats don't stand for anything that would bring any voters who want to vote left, quote unquote, would come out to vote for.
Right. They represented their constituents. Michigan would be one of the best states in the country on Israel-Palestine policy. They have a very large Arab and Muslim population, but just the opposite. I mean, there were some videos that came out about a week and a half ago of Michigan state troopers, not feds, not only feds, but Michigan state troopers kicking in the doors of protesters. That's made. Those are decisions made on the state level. That's not Trump.
So then what are they going to do? They're going to go vote Democrat?
Right.
No.
Exactly.
But the people who like that are going to triple down on showing up at the polls for Republicans because they're getting what they want. They serve their voters.
Exactly.
Please clap.